Maybe you should, you want to come to the
Go
podium?
ahead. It's already on. It's already on. It was. Yeah, try it again. There you go.
This is good. Okay, let's try this a second time. Good evening, everyone. My name is Amy Martinez. I'm the organizing director at Connecticut Working Families Power, which is an independent, progressive political organization. We run legislative campaigns across the state to improve the lives of working class people. Our recent victories for the working class include paid family and medical leave, and just last year, we helped lead the expansion of paid sick days for all Connecticut workers. I'm happy to be here this evening with all of you to discuss the importance of the state budget this year and making changes to Connecticut's current fiscal guardrail laws. So 2025 is a state budget year. Therefore, the governor and the state legislature are currently working on Connecticut's budget plan for the next 2 years, which we hope is finalized by early June of this year. The state budget is how Connecticut defines our priorities. It lays out which programs receive funding and how we pay for them. So why is the state budget so important, and how does this impact working class people and the issues that we care about? With a show of hands, raise your hand if you believe Connecticut public schools are currently underfunded. Keep your arms raised, just keep them up. Raise your hand if you believe we should further invest in childcare programs, invest in affordable housing, invest in the state's infrastructure, expand access to health care. Now look around you. Go ahead and put your hands down now. These are all issues many of us could get behind and can agree that further investment is needed in order to help address these issues. Let me see, I just want to make sure I don't. So since the start of the year, we have been urging the state legislature and Governor Nell Lamont to put forward a state budget that fully funds Connecticut public programs and state services. This is even more urgent now with the ongoing increased federal funding cuts by the current administration in Washington, which has had a huge negative impact, not just on local organizations, but on Connecticut public programs as well, which provide critical services to our communities. As a result of these ongoing federal funding cuts, the state would have to allocate additional state funding in order to continue to provide these services. And Connecticut has the money and the opportunity to minimize the blow on Connecticut residents by providing an equitable state budget. But what are the barriers? When people talk about Connecticut, they refer to it as a wealthy state. But we all know Connecticut has the highest level of income inequality in the entire country. And when the governor talks about the state's reserve fund, he gloats that Connecticut has over $1 billion in surplus. But if that's the case, why are we not investing a portion of that revenue back into the communities that desperately need it? This budget reserve fund is often referred to as a rainy day fund. But as we can see, it is already pouring on thousands of Connecticut workers and families in the state today. And when we ask for additional funding, the response is always the same. We don't have the budget for it, we can't afford it. But let me tell you something. What we can't afford is for families to lose a roof over their heads. What we can't afford is to lose childcare services. What we definitely can't afford is cuts to Social Security and Medicaid that many of our seniors rely on. And most definitely, what we cannot afford is for our education that our children receive to be dependent on our zip code. A child in New Britain, a child in Bridgeport deserve the same quality education as someone in Avon or Farmington or Greenwich. Needless to say, we must demand a state budget that actually meets our needs. Another huge roadblock to fully funding our programs is the current fiscal guardrail policies, which consists of 3 interlocking budget restrictions. We have a spending cap, we have a revenue cap, and we also have a volatility cap. These policies were enacted in 2017 to help create budget rules, guidelines, and spending restraints, which is all fine, right? But however, the fiscal guardrail policies are so restrictive to the point of blocking any new spending, which limits the state's ability to further fund our programs and even forcing budget cuts, despite economic growth and massive surplus in the state of Connecticut. For example, Connecticut is projected to end the fiscal year with a staggering $1.6 billion in surplus. Yet, if we change nothing in regards to the spending cap, the next state budget will have to cut its spending by $400 million. That is $400 million that does not get invested into our communities, which is crazy, right? So during this year's legislative session, we've been pressuring legislators to do one of 2 things. The first option is to declare a fiscal emergency in order to temporarily lift the fiscal guardrail policies. Or the second option is to just make permanent modifications to the fiscal guardrails so we can raise and spend money that Connecticut needs, especially in the wake of the Trump administration. And at this moment, we need leadership in Connecticut to choose which side are they on. Will they decide to allow the federal government to continue to harm Connecticut, or will they decide to fully fund our programs in order to continue to serve and protect Connecticut residents and our most vulnerable communities here? We do support the need for a responsible budget. And we also support the need of a budget reserve fund. Any responsible state should. But it cannot come at the expense of immediate public needs and critical public investments, all in the name of fiscal responsibility. And I know that the fiscal guardrails are confusing, and so is the state budget. And this might be the least interesting topic up here, but I promise you that the impact that the state budget process and the impact that the fiscal guardrails have and the type of services your children and yourself are offered on a daily basis is dependent on that. I'm gonna pass it over to our next panelist, but I'm excited and looking forward to questions that you may have.
Thank you.
So they said that I have 5 minutes and I have so much to tell you, so I'm going to try, but I can't promise. Today I was at the senior day at the Capitol, and I'm the president and CEO of Western Connecticut Area Agency on Aging. How many of you know what that organization is and does? That is so sad. I'm working so hard. Isn't that sad? So
Isn't it good we have her
yes,
here? Yay!
That is why I'm here. So we represent your town. I cover 41 towns in Western Connecticut. I'm one of 5 AAAs. I work with the other AAAs for state legislation, and I work with them to try to bring money to Connecticut. But I represent all of you. So New Milford is one of my towns, and we are out there, and I am advocating for you every day, and we bring a lot of money that you don't even know comes from us, comes into your community. So we are the pass-through and we give out grants to your community for things like transportation. You call it Meals on Wheels, we call it elderly nutrition. We run that here in New Milford. So we're the people ask me for money and I give it out to the community. So those dollars come from the federal government, and they come from the Older Americans Act. So the AAAs, which is what we call ourselves, which is Area Agencies on Aging, are a direct result of the Older Americans Act. And that money gives money for transportation, all the things that I put a lot of information back there so that you could say you knew who we were after I left today. But we work very closely with your senior centers, your municipal agents, your town government, and different nonprofits in your community that provide all kinds of chore services, transportation. We have in-home services. Maybe you have a housing program. We may have somebody there that we support. We support some senior centers. And senior center programs and some YMCA programs for seniors. So anything around seniors and disabilities. That is our role, and people from my 41 towns can apply to us and get funding that we give out based on all kinds of things under Title III, which is A, B, C, D, and E, and they all fund something different, but different programs. So, and on top of that, I'm doing a lot at the state level, advocating. So I'm telling you all of this so you understand my role, and my role is really just to support the seniors and keep our seniors, in programs and things that keep them healthy and well. So the Older Americans Act is really what's on the chopping block. So that is all of those things that I'm doing in these 41 towns are at risk based on the budget proposal. Now I want to keep saying proposal because it was leaked, we don't know. I want to be really clear on that. I also want to be really clear that I was at Senior Day at the Capitol today, and we do have bipartisan support, and they do not want to hurt our seniors is the feedback that I'm getting from them. They have been supportive of the AAAs. Many of them are on the aging committees. This is positive at the state level. So state level, I'm feeling supported by our legislation, but that doesn't mean we don't need to advocate. But I'm going to kind of read through this so that you understand what these changes mean to your community. So the Trump administration proposed fiscal year 2026, so that would be the federal fiscal year, which starts October 1st. And I just finished the area plan. It's in draft with the state right now, which has the plan of how we would distribute funds out to the community. This directly impacts that. If you don't know what the area plan is, see me please after class, okay? So this preliminary budget plan calls for major changes to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, including a reorganization of the Older Americans Act. So our programs, there's our Older American Act programs and substantial cuts to related aging services. It also signals potential impacts on Medicare, Medicaid, and other social services that Connecticut Department of Social Services helps to administer. While these proposals are alarming, it's important to remember that the president's budget is an opening request. Congress ultimately controls federal spending. And many lawmakers from both parties have already voiced concern, meaning these changes are far from certain. In the meantime, our agency, Western Connecticut Area Agency on Aging, everybody's gonna know that, call us WCAA, WCAA. Our agency is closely monitoring the developments, and I'm going to give you a summary of the proposed changes and just try to absorb it all, because it's a lot. So the FY26 budget blueprint for, I'm going to try not to use acronyms, so Health and Human Services includes significant restructuring and funding cuts that could affect core programs for seniors. According to earlier reports, this was as of April 21st, the administration intends to break apart the coordination of the Older American Act services and even eliminate several federal aging programs. So here are the most critical proposed changes. The reorganization of the Older American Act program. The budget outlines a plan to dissolve the Administration for Community Living. The Health and Human Services Agency that has been the administrator of OAA programs for over a decade, as well as the Federal Administration on Aging. I'm saying OAA instead of Older Americans Act. Programs would be split up and moved to other agencies. For example, our nutrition programs, which a lot of people call Meals on Wheels and we call elderly nutrition, would shift to the Administration for Children and Families. While most other older American services like transportation, in-home care, and caregiver support would move under Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the dismantling of the Older American Act's unified structure sparks concern because it was designed as a comprehensive system of supports for seniors. So now they want to fragment it. So we're thinking the fragmenting it could reduce the efficiency and the effectiveness. And so I'll give you a story because I think stories stick with you better. So we have service navigators. So when you call our agency and you say, my mom is having some problems with her memory. And you know, we're trying to figure out what to do because I don't think she's really safe at home and she needs some support. And she's having a hard time getting in and out of her tub and taking and bathing. And I'm worried that she's not eating properly. So that goes to our service navigator. And our service navigator now, under all of this umbrella Older American Act, will work with that person. Say it's the caregiver, right? The daughter's concerned or son, and say, okay, well, let's see what we can do to get some services in for mom. So we're going to set her up with an elderly nutrition program based on her dietary needs. We're going to set her up with some home care. Maybe we can put a door through chore services in her tub so that she can get in and out easily. And we're gonna work on getting some long-term planning in place because we see that mom's deteriorating and we know that the need is going to become greater, but let's get things in place so that mom can stay at home and comfortable. And that is our role, is to keep seniors in their homes. And that's our whole mission, is really to keep seniors aging in place, right? In their homes where they want to be. So all of that now is here. That's what I'm trying to explain, okay? I know I'm talking really fast.
Okay, and then we're gonna have to wrap up.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay, so I'm going, those are the biggest cuts. I'm going to say I have a lot more in the back. They're looking at cutting the home care program. So I have some advocacy alerts and additional information in the back, but I'm not allowed to talk anymore, so I'm here.
Sorry, yes. Go for it. Yes, Lou.
Thank you. My name is Lou Rosado Birch. I'm the legislative coordinator at Connecticut Education Association. We're the state's largest teachers union, representing 43,000 active and retired teachers across Connecticut. I wanted to just take a moment here and acknowledge and thank all of the amazing women on this panel and the folks who have organized this event. Thank you for hosting this important conversation. I also want to acknowledge we have a few teachers in the room, so thanks so much for joining us today. So just to kind of dive right in, Ann asked me to talk a little bit about some of the federal cuts that we anticipate coming when it comes to education, and talk a little bit about how some of those cuts impact New Fairfield specifically. And so some of this still remains to be seen. As Ms. Raymond said just a moment ago, the budget proposal that came out is just that. Came out last Friday, the President's skinny budget request to Congress, which contained a number of, once again, we're seeing quite a bit of kind of consolidation, reallocation of programs, and cuts to educational programming across the board. And so the U.S. Department of Education in that budget proposal would sustain a $12 billion with a B reduction, approximately a 15.3% cut. And once again, there's some really creative mathematics that are being kind of employed into this budget. And so the proposal says it will preserve funding for federal Title I programs, that's federal financial assistance to districts with children from low-income families. However, that Title I funding is now being combined into a block grant with about 18 other programs. And then that fund is being cut by 4.5 upwards of $4.5 billion. So one of the concerns here is when you start to see this kind of reallocation, reorganization of budgets, that's usually kind of a precursor to say this program is on its way to being zeroed out. If not in this budget, at some point in the near future, it's something that we need to be concerned about. Funding for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA, is supposed to remain at current levels, and so flat funding for IDEA. And all 7 IDEA programs will be combined into a single fund. And once again, flat funding those programs at 13% still falls far short of the federal commitment to fully fund IDEA at 40%. And so, whenever you hear, flat funding, that should be a kind of, a red flag should go off, because we know that costs go up over time, right? In the same way that the cost of living increases over time, we should expect that the cost of these programs will increase over time as well. So the budget allocates $500 million, which is a $60 million increase to expand charter schools. This is the only education line item to receive an increase in this proposed budget. Thank you. I'll pause for that. Furthermore, the budget eliminates funding for English language programs under Title III and the Teacher Quality Partnership. It's a program aimed at addressing the teacher shortage and through deep clinical practice to ensure that educators are prepared to meet the diverse student needs that they find in their classrooms. And so in terms of higher education, it eliminates popular college prep programs, it cuts work study and supplemental education opportunity grants, once again with the focus on shifting the cost for these institutions to the state level and reducing federal commitments. I'll save some of the early education pieces for my colleague Ava to touch on in just a few minutes. But the other things that we're really concerned about, we have an idea as to how some of these cuts are going to impact our state and our communities, but some of the things that we're also concerned about are the cuts that we don't see yet, right? And so we're also anticipating additional cuts for states and municipalities who maintain sanctuary city status or who fail to prohibit the participation of trans athletes in youth sports. Reduce funding for community health programs and other services that benefit low-income students directly. Things like the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the Free School Lunch Program, these kinds of things, as well as, again, continued efforts to undermine public education and funnel taxpayer money to charter and parochial schools through school vouchers, education access tax credits, and other programs. So this is part of the movement that we see to really embrace this idea of school choice without really addressing some of the underlying kind of financial concerns that exist and mitigating some of those financial impacts that charter schools and some of these other school voucher programs actually have on our local boards of education. And so I'll start to kind of wind things down a little bit. In the back, there's some materials. You'll see a chart, a green and red chart with some CEA branding on it that talks a little bit about the total anticipated cuts to Connecticut. That number is north of $321 million. New Milford is not on this list, but the number there that you all are going to want to write in is $1,799,585. And that combines a total of over $500,000 in cuts to Title I funds. This is specific to New Milford. These are federal funds that come to that your district benefit from directly. Title I cuts over $500,000. Title III, that's the English Language Learners Program, over $39,497, and over $1 million in IDEA funding. These are critical funds, especially as the Board of Finance here in town has proposed upwards of a $1.6 million cut to the education budget, with an additional $300,000 in cuts from the town council, and a recent announcement that the Board of Education was going to be furloughing 65 pink slips to education staff, including teachers and paraprofessionals. So these cuts couldn't come at a worse time. There's generally an understanding, New Milford, along with a number of other towns in the state of Connecticut, has had declining enrollment in recent years. And yet we know that the building still costs the same amount, if not more, to run, to keep the overhead, the lights on, these kinds of things, the materials that our students need to thrive. Many of these districts are already severely underfunded. And while we work to, again, make sure that our state is adequately funding our schools, these federal funds really help to kind of fill in some of those gaps. And so, we're encouraging folks to take a couple of actions. One of those things is to be vocal, when it comes to the federal budget proposal. Thankfully, Congresswoman Johanna Hayes has been very supportive of public education over the years, but she still needs to hear from you all. And I would also just put in a plug for the May 20th budget referendum here in town, to vote on the proposed cuts to New Milford's education budget. And so we are asking folks to vote no, too low. I also want to just take a moment to acknowledge Suzanne Havlin, who's in the back. She's also she's one of our UNISERV representatives at CEA, working with your teachers, as well as working on this upcoming budget referendum to make sure that we're able to get the resources we need to keep our kids learning. So, thank you. I'm sorry, I wish I had better news for you all, but really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to talk to you all about these issues. Pass it off to my friend Sam.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Sam Danowski. I am the environmental interlude between the two education speakers. I'm the state director of the Sierra Club. If you're not familiar with the Sierra Club, we are one of the oldest and the largest environmental organization in the United States, chapters all over the country, and I am part of the Connecticut chapter, which focuses on issues here in Connecticut. A little bit about us: our mission is to enjoy and explore and protect. We have an active outings group getting people outside. We do multiple educational programs every month. And we work hard on environmental policy. And I have some materials in the back. Please, if you want to hear from us, sign up. You'll see a little bit more about where to find our hikes, our events, and more about our issues. And I'll get into some specific ones in Connecticut here in a minute, but I want to start on the federal side. And kind of the big picture. I mean, the most pressing environmental issue we all face is climate change. It is happening faster than expected, but is rolling out pretty much as scientists have told us. The last 10 years have been the hottest 10 years on record globally. 2024 was the hottest year on record. Here in Connecticut, we're having an increasing number of high heat days. We're losing winter. Last year, we had, very devastating flooding, heavy rains, extreme weather. We also had a drought. This is exactly what the scientists said would happen. We'd have drought periods. We'd have really much more torrential rains. During the drought period in the fall, we had multiple wildfires across Connecticut. It's an issue we are just not prepared for, and we're not mitigating fast enough. And so we're advocating for those things to happen. And the cost of climate change, it impacts every part of our lives, but it is driving up the cost of electricity as you need more air conditioning. You're spending more on energy. It is driving up the cost of food. It's driving up the cost of insurance. It's driving up the cost of housing. It's a financial disaster, and we're just not, as far as policy goes, acting on it urgently enough. At the federal level, you won't be surprised to hear that not only is there no urgency to acting, there's actually rollbacks. On the first day of this administration, multiple executive orders were put in place, including one that pulled the United States out of the international climate agreements, making us one of only 4 countries. that are not in that agreement. So along with Iran and Libya and Yemen, we are not in that agreement. In March, a number of rollbacks were made at the federal level at the EPA level that really have an impact on us. We, at the federal level, they've been trying to clean up dirty power plants. In Connecticut, a lot of our dirty air comes from out of state, just blows right over here. And so those rollbacks, including the rollbacks of the Clean Power Plan, the Good Neighbor Rule, the mercury and air toxic standards, mean that they're not cleaning up those plants where our air is coming in from. The Inflation Reduction Act, which is an exciting investment in the transition to clean energy for Americans, that is being rolled back. And here in Connecticut, there's a lot of questions as to whether the money is going to come or not. But we have hundreds of millions of dollars at stake that we're supposed to come to Connecticut to help transition to clean energy. Offshore wind projects, which are critically important to our energy future, and one of actually the greatest resource we have in New England for energy. We don't have coal under our feet, we don't have gas, we don't have oil, but we have what's called the Saudi Arabia of wind, like the best wind in the world. Trump administration has basically taken that off on the table. Happy to report that our Attorney General, William Tong, along with 18 other states, sued the Trump administration for halting those projects and hampering wind development. And so they're pushing for reversal. Remains to see if that will happen. And then on the budget side, the budget cuts, there's a proposal to cut the EPA 55%. And here at the state level, our state Department of Energy and Environmental Protection gets a good deal of its funds from the EPA. So their efforts to protect our environment, their efforts to bring us services like parks are going to be at risk. So we have to fight back on the federal level, but we also have a bit of an uphill battle at the state level as well. So there's lots of opportunities, there's lots of obstacles. I just want to talk about two, and particularly one that's local to you all, and ask for your help. We really need your help. So if you do one thing after today, I'm going to ask you to help with Brookfield. So 4 folks from Brookfield who have been very, very vocal and active in trying to stop a terrible gas expansion proposal in Brookfield are here tonight. So if you raise your hand, Pam and Eric and Joanne and Kathy, please ask them about this afterward. Talk to them. They need your help. We have several pipelines that pass through Connecticut. One of those pipelines goes through Sherman, New Milford, Brookfield, Newtown, Monroe, Shelton, and Milford. It comes in from New York. It passes back into New York. It just runs through the state. We don't use any of the gas. The giant company that owns this is proposing to push lots more gas through that pipeline. It's an aging, poorly constructed pipeline in the first place. But in Brookfield is where they have this big fossil fuel driven compressor station. And what a compressor station does is it compresses the gas so it can keep moving through the pipeline. They are proposing to double it. It's incredibly polluting. It's 1,900 feet from the middle school. Nothing about it makes sense. They have a permit before the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection right now. We need calls, like back there's information, but tomorrow, if you do nothing else, call the governor, call the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and ask them to reject that permit. So, the other, the legislature is in session, so we've heard, and there's a lot of debate about energy costs, which I think everyone is probably concerned about. But what we are concerned about is in that debate, possibly getting completely destroyed is our award-winning energy efficiency program that helps people save money and that drives down demand and that takes strain off our grid. That is under threat of being completely lost. The other is our solar programs. Those are really at threat of being completely undermined and basically ending the solar industry in Connecticut. So pay attention to those things. I'm happy to answer questions afterwards, or I guess during this, and I'll pass it to Eva.
At this point from the other speakers, I think you hear a repeating theme here of it's all interconnected. And even if you're talking about education, health and human services, the environment, they're all right now being cut, being decimated, and you can't have one literally without the other. My name is Eva Bermuda Zimmerman. I'm an organizer and child care advocate. I've been working in the child care space now for close to 13 years, organizing in different capacities for 19 years. And in this last month or so, like my partners here at the Capitol and Advocates, it's not good. Specifically in early care, we are in a point in Connecticut's history where the juxtaposition is real. We're actually on the up and on the cusp of transformational laws and changes that took 20 years to advocate for. And to layer on top of that amazing success, the possibility and reality of real cuts will derail the whole conversation and it started derailing the conversation. For those of you who are not familiar with the nuance of early care, if you are a childless person, decision, not decision, doesn't matter, and you're wondering, why do childcare cuts affect me? Well, no surprise that in Connecticut, we have a declining population like most of other parts of the world and of the nation. Our population, it keeps, going on, and if we don't have more people, and who will be there to be the future doctors, the future nurses, people in service industries? So if you're wondering when you grab your cup of coffee, and I know in New Milford for months and months and months, you go and it says, or it closed early, or you go to Burger King and looking signs paying in Burger King and fast food places $2-3 more than the minimum wage average, desperate for people. So if you go to grab your cup of coffee and a place is closed, or your fast food place and a place is closed early, and you're like, how could this be? They're a chain. The likelihood of it being because of the workforce not being available, or because of childcare, the lack of, is pretty high. Last year, CBIA, an organization, the Business Association here in Connecticut, who tends to be known as more conservative leaning, they put out a demand for money and funding for childcare. And one of their studies announced that $1.5 billion in Connecticut's GDP is what we lose in revenue because of the impact of childcare. The other example, again, if you're someone that maybe your kids are older and you're a grandparent and you're thinking, well, I'm a grandparent, it's not affecting me right now, but you do see the impact on your own children, then ask them how much childcare costs for one child. I'm not talking about the good old days, or even when I was a kid, where my parents had the luxury to raise 3 kids. My mom stayed home. My dad, is now a retired teacher. So on his teacher's salary, shout out to CEA and AFT, on his teacher's salary, because they fought really hard with those contracts and the demands in his teacher's contract, they raised 3 kids. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and we had 2 cars. We had vacations. I had piano classes and flute classes and camp and meteorology camp and like language classes. All of that cost money. And we had a good reality. And you could do that. You could do that literally 20-something years ago. And now you're asking young people who are thinking about having kids, who have $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 of student loan debt, to think about having a family because we need kids, or they're starting to have a family, and then when they look at the price tag, which childcare is not $5,000 or $2,000, it's $20,000 for one child, and the price tag is more than a state university tuition for 1 year. You're starting to do the math and realizing maybe I should put it off. Maybe I shouldn't have kids, or could I even afford it? Or if you are a young person and you did decide to have kids, then you're in the desperation of figuring it out. Let's figure it out. How do you figure it out? Well, I'll put it on a credit card. Or one of my friends took a HELOC on her house to pay for her childcare, which is insane, especially with the APR that it is right now. That's literally the worst time to do a HELOC. Nonetheless, if you're in a nursing home, if you're trying to grab your coffee, if you're trying to go to work, if you're trying to sell your house and figuring out, can I get the best bottom dollar on the house, but you figure out no one wants to move in your town, it's going to affect you. Childcare is literally part of all of our lives, no matter if you want it or not. And here in Connecticut, going back to my preface, we are sponsoring 14 different legislative bills that are all alive. Usually during legislative session, childcare bills die within a month, and we're at the end of session, and all of them are alive. We're looking at, yes, props to our legislators, yeah. We're looking at the Republican House budget proposed $380 million in childcare money for an endowment to let it accrue, and the Democrats are proposing $300, and they're in this tit for tat, one-upping each other on childcare, while now those numbers might not, they almost cease to exist, because if you're putting 300, 400, tit for tat, whatever, compete over childcare, great, it doesn't matter what party you're on, do the right thing. And in that tit for tat, if the feds are closing down Head Start, and they're defunding programs that already exist and cost $400 million, then where does that leave us? We're worse off. We're going backwards based on a reality that we had every right to change based on who we voted for and not knowing the impact. So we're sitting with our choices, some of us. We're sitting with the fear, and the only thing that we can do is advocate for what does it look like? Who is it hurting? And figuring out and scrambling how we can lift each other up in this time. For Head Start, there's 6,000 slots that are impending doom, right? 6,000 low-income slots. For block grants, CDBG, you're looking at an additional 23,000 slots. There's already a waiting list for all of these programs, so there's thousands more people who need it but don't have access, who qualify and need it, but don't have access because we don't have enough funding already. And overall in the state of Connecticut, out of the 181,000 kids that exist, you're looking at about 60,000 of them that have almost no options in funding. So those numbers are staggering, and we're trying to balance out what's the best course of action, and we're all trying to make sure that the feds don't gut anymore. So I'll leave it with that.
All right. Well, okay, so that's a lot. But I think, an incredible amount of information and very timely. So now we're going to turn the floor over to you. So please line up if you want to speak at the mic, or pass your questions to Irene or folks who can, who are raising their hands to, yes, oh, good, okay, who'll pass them to me. All right, and please just say your name and where you live.
My name is Barry Glover. I live in New Fairfield. Let me summarize everything you said in 3 sentences. The Trump administration knows no bound to its cruelty as it cuts all programs that benefit individual people. And I'll add the parentheses in favor of the corporations who are going to get the money. Two, you're asking that Connecticut make up the balance of all the cut funds from the federal government to replace them to maintain the very necessary social services that we all benefit from. Let me ask you some practical questions. You mentioned that there is a $1.4 billion surplus. Is that a fixed fund or is that the annual budget has a profit of $1.5 billion?
That's a great question, but unfortunately I don't have the numbers and exact details in front of me, but I could circle back around and give you the answer to that.
But I think I just want to add to that Connecticut has the funding. It's there. It's the fiscal guardrail policies that don't allow us to touch that money. And I would say when we advocate for making changes to the fiscal guardrail policies, and even right now where we're asking the governor to declare a fiscal emergency in order to put a pause and temporary hold those fiscal guardrail policies, it would also allow us to make sure that everyone is paying their equal share of taxes, right? I think we can all agree that a lot of the wealthy folks here in Connecticut aren't paying their fair share. So it's a balance of both, making sure that the rich are being taxed and are paying their fair share. We're all paying into this revenue. It is there. We're just not allowed to touch it.
Well, when you propose numbers, I'd like to have some real figures and not just waving your hand, because there's a difference between blowing the entire reserve fund in 1 year versus what we actually have available to spend in a year.
Yep, and I think I just want to say something to respond to you, and I'll make sure that our policy folks provide us with actual numbers and we can circle back around with you. But I think no one's asking to empty out the bank account. That's not what we're saying. The funding is there, and the money that we need isn't going to empty out that reserve. We all support that any state should have a reserve. It is a responsible thing to do. But it is raining right now, and it is pouring on working class families, and we need to make sure that we're able to access that money when it's needed, and that families aren't losing a roof over their head. But I do see that Ava wants to say something.
What's your name, sir?
Barry.
Barry, okay, Barry. Barry, you're wearing a belt, which is very practical. A lot of people wear belts when you want to keep your pants up, right? So think of the state budget as your pants, right? You want to keep them up, and to keep them up, you add one notch, and the pants are up. But sometimes you lose weight, and you want to make them a little tighter, and you go to the second notch, maybe the third or the fourth notch. The surplus money is not your first notch, or the second, or the third. It's a fourth notch. It's extra tight. Even though you lost weight, it's so tight that you need to let it go a little. And the reason it's that fourth notch is because the $1.4 billion that Amy mentioned earlier, it is not our rainy day fund. It is extra money that we made on top of our rainy day fund, our surplus, our volatility cap, and our budget reserve fund. So years ago, when we were in deficit because we didn't pay our bills, we didn't pay the pension fund, I won't go into the politics of who did what, because it's a 70-year crisis that was ignored by a multitude of politicians on both sides of the aisle. Nonetheless, in modern day times of who is there now, they made decisions to create fiscal constraints. We call it fiscal constraints at the LOB. Other people call it guardrails, whatever you want to call it. Legislators decided that their way to pay their bills and make sure that Connecticut was going to be able to rise above whatever crisis, that they were going to put these extra guardrails, these extra constraints, these extra caps for emergencies. They paid and filled it in full. those reserves, each pot of money, each notch that they did was tightening and tightening, saying we gotta get our fiscal house in order, and they tightened so much that there's extra money that can't go anywhere else. And our funding here in the state of Connecticut, our biennium budget, every 2 years, the way it works is everything is allocated in once every 2 years, and it's not like you have a place to leave it in a department. You can't just leave the money there. It's a general fund. So if you wanted to give DEP $100 million more and say just keep it, that's legally not possible. If you wanted to give ECS and say sit on $300 million because we don't know if you're going to have a rainy day with everything that's going on, they literally can't do it. They have to allocate, and then depending on the regulations, depending on the department, then reallocate, and then anything that's extra, they ask for it back. And the 1.4 is extra on top of the extra on top of the extra and on top of the extra. So that's why, so sure, there's no, the question that you asked, going back to your question of the fixed rate, like, can you give me another number? I'm basically trying to answer your question. Nobody knows because you're playing the stock market with that extra money. So if the stock market in Connecticut is doing well, and the way that we're playing the odds, right now it's 7% returns, you can use baby bonds as an example, then you're gonna get an extra surplus of 1.4 billion. If the stock market is bad, then you won't get that same return. But nonetheless, the money is there, and it's not just one pot of money.
Okay, great, thank you. I think we're gonna have to move on to the next question.
Yes, you're gonna have to shrink that. I do probably 3 to 4 hours of homework, is what I call it, checking every resource about what on earth is going on today. And it is becoming very clear, and I have to ask all 5 of you. You are well versed, and you are all drowning in the detail of what you have as tasks. It's very easy to get lost in the bottom of the bottle when it's filled to the top with all this stuff you have to juggle. The thing that I am seeing, and I am asking all of you, is anybody talking about what's going to happen, which is coming down the road? He's going to cut off everything to the states. Medicare is going to be ours to take care of. Medicaid is going to be ours to take care of. All the help programs for Connecticut residents will be Connecticut's headache. Are they also taking 2 minutes a day to prepare for the inevitable? Because he's working very hard on it, and every day you see him take another peg out of the dike.
Thank you. Go ahead, and then I'm gonna.
I thought she was asking a question. I'm sorry.
I'll just,
Some people want to make comments, and that's fine.
Okay.
I'll just respond very quickly, and then you
Take
can go
your
right
time.
ahead. You asked a great question. It really galvanizes like some of the gravity of what we're talking about. In my view, this is an acceleration of something that's been happening for probably 40 or 50 years, right? And since
We're going to do it all at once.
right, and so the other thing that occurs to me is that, and I've had this experience because I do some work with National Education Association. They meet a couple of times a year in different parts of the country with other state NEA affiliates. And one of the things that really stunned me from the most recent government affairs conference that I went to is the response from folks in red states, which is like, this is like another Monday for us, right? And so we also have to recognize that the experience that we're having and the shock that we're experiencing right now is something that a lot of folks around the country have been living with for years and years, right? And so I just think you bring up a great point. We're just now getting to a place where people all over the country are really starting to understand the severity of what we're talking about. And so I just think that, it just really underscores the importance of education, making sure we are taking in as much information from as many different sources as we possibly can, and really doing our diligence in terms of, making sure we have the facts and the figures to Barry's point. So thank you for that. Yep.
Hi, my name's Exine Lofgren, and Ava, I'm not wearing a belt. I want to take everybody here really quick. I know it's preaching to the choir to you when I hear this, but I grew up in a town of Chicago, yay Pope, and even though I'm Jewish, I'm still happy. And I grew up in the 70s, and teachers went on strike every year for 3 years. 1 year I didn't get out of 7th grade until July. And that was because in the 60s, they started all of these cuts and everything. And then it trickled down, and it got to the point where my English teacher said, well, I could teach you Shakespeare, but none of you are going to be president. And and when people in this town say that can't happen here, not only can it happen, but it took Chicago 20 years after I graduated to get up. And that's going to happen in towns like this. And I think it's ironic that the average age group who votes is 45 and up, and they're taking your rights. That makes no sense to me. But my real question is on the youth. And that is, how do we get them interested? 20 million people did not vote. And there's a big reason for that, and it's various different reasons. But how do we get them interested in who they are? And when I say young, I'm 57, I'm talking like 45 and under. And we have to get them, or anything we do makes no sense. And it's talking into the wind. And I asked a certain politician that, and they said, well, we need to bring him to the table. And then I said, how? And he didn't have an answer.
Okay, that's a great question. Anybody want to take that up? No.
I think when it comes to engaging the youth, we have to meet them where they are at. I want you to look around and tell me how many youth do you see sitting in this town hall?
Oh, one in the back.
I'm not saying that there's zero.
they're at the kids' table.
They're at the kids' table in the back. But there's definitely only a handful of youth here.
Yeah.
And again, I think it goes to our point. We have to meet our youth where they're at. Where are they hanging out? What are the things that interest them? And how is it that what's happening now going to impact them, right? Some youth, maybe you can say, yeah, we're all heading to get older, and these Social Security cuts and this Medicaid cuts are gonna screw us all over, right? Like, we should care, right? But again, I just think we need to meet our youth where they're at and speak to them as regular human beings, as we all should, right, in this room, and explain to them what's at stake. And again, it's just meeting people where they're at, figuring out where they're hanging out at, and just speaking to them directly, right? Like, yeah, we're tabling at farmers market, but are you seeing our youth there? We should be tabling somewhere else as well to make sure folks are being registered. We know that seniors are turning 18 and graduating and going into college. Why aren't we tabling near their high school? Why aren't we going directly there and being like, here you go, here's a stamp on your mail-in ballot, on your registration. Just go fill it out, submit it to your town hall. I'll let other folks here share some other responses.
And I want to just say, while the mic's being passed, that Act Local would love any ideas about how to get young people more involved with us. Tell us where to go. We'll go wherever they are. To Amy's point, like we've been talking about this.
Nutmeg Games.
What?
In Nutmeg Games.
Okay, so let's go. We're gonna do it.
Oh, sure, I'll play
Okay.
Magic the Gathering with you. It'll be
Okay,
great.
all right, awesome. Let's do it. Yeah.
Exine, you're a cool cat, so if you ask me to go with you somewhere, I'll go.
Oh, I love you, dear. You know I do. And your husband.
To echo Amy, it's really kind of out of sight, out of mind. I was literally talking to some friends of mine a few days ago about this. Like, I got involved with healthcare organizing when I was younger, and I got diagnosed with cancer at like 19, 20, and I couldn't pay for it, and I'm like, oh, like this is really bad, so I should do something. But that's how I got involved for healthcare organizing as a volunteer. It's really hard to try to frame crisis when it's not their crisis. You know, they don't, or it is, but it's not. Yeah, like how do you
that makes
convince
sense.
a 15-year-old or even a 20-year-old, like Medicaid matters when there's still, we do have still some laws that allow parents and guardians to keep them on health insurance, so they're not really thinking about that. Or how do you convince the impending doom of maybe possibly Social Security disappearing, you know, say, do you want to work till you're